Today, we will hear testimony about the Department of Housing and Urban Development's budget request for $66 billion in discretionary budget authority. And you guys may want to arm wrestle over it.
I never thought I'd say this, but California's doing something positive and market-driven. Since 2014, the federal government has issued nearly $20 billion in awards to communities in homeless assistance, an increase of 53%. Chronic homelessness over the same period increased 56%, and unsheltered homelessness increased 30%.
They're running into this problem where they can't confirm the voucher holder's ability to pay rent because the Public Housing Authority will not confirm how much the housing voucher will cover until there's an agreement in place with the landlord. However, the landlord, this is like a chicken and egg thing.
Are you aware of the dramatic increase in overdose deaths inside federally supported Housing First programs?
I'm sure that there's an uptick.
Today, I'd like to welcome the Acting Secretary of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Honorable Adrianne Todman, to this hearing on HUD's fiscal year 2025 budget request. Thank you, Madam Secretary, for appearing here today. Delighted to hear from you. Today, we will hear testimony about the Department of Housing and Urban Development's budget request for $66 billion in discretionary budget authority in fiscal 25. HUD also uses mortgage guarantee fees from the Federal Housing Administration to offset its spending. The Office of Management and Budget currently estimates $6.7 billion in offsetting receipts for fiscal 25, an increase of $1.2 billion from the fiscal year 2024. Can you remind the subcommittee on the DR process and steps HUD has taken to ensure that funds appropriated to communities are quickly dispersed?
Certainly. Well, as I mentioned in my opening comments, Chairman, we certainly do need Congress's help to not just authorize the program, but also to provide us with those disaster recovery funds. I yet to receive some of the funding that we need to take care of our storms that happened in 2023. And certainly look forward to working with this subcommittee and others to get that across the line. Having said that, one of the things that we did do very recently was reach out to all of the existing disaster recovery grantees, those states and big towns that's received our funding, but also the general public to say, how can we do this better? We know that we're not perfect. We know that this is meeting families and communities their most traumatic time. Received a lot of information, and we'll be putting that to work to make sure we are streamlining the program.
What is probably going to be our annual need as we go forward so we can appropriately plan and budget?
Yeah. So I know that we have sent over to the Congress sort of our DR funds need for the 2023 storms, and I believe that's like $3.2 billion. $3.2 billion is the existing need.
Can you pull your microphone a little
Certainly.
closer?
I'll get a little closer. $3.2 billion is our existing need based on the storms that occurred in 2023. That doesn't include any storms that's occurred so far this year and probably at the tail end of last year.
Can you talk about the innovative public-private funds that offer new and more flexible gap financing that could increase the pace at which these local communities can eliminate the public health threat and complement existing efforts?
No, absolutely. So, almost everything that HUD does requires the public and private sector working with each other. We know that our health hazard funds are sometimes matched with funds that are with nonprofits and other private sector partners on the ground. We know that we need to do more of that. We know that we have businesses who are very interested in making sure that we're moving lead hazards in and around their communities as well. And so I think that there's more work to do there.
What aspects of your FY25 request will help improve the rate at which the department can assist communities in eliminating these home-based hazards?
Right. Well, certainly, the budget reflects some of the constraints placed by the Fiscal Responsibility Act, and so we're trying to be responsible stewards and follow that law. But certainly, we prioritize this, and we do have a robust number in there to carry out the work of our health hazards program. It's lead, it's mold, it's radon, it's all the things that we know are hurting our families, and we certainly look forward to working with the subcommittee on what our final number looks like.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce. And now I'm going to recognize one of my Democrat friends, and you guys may want to arm wrestle over it. I don't know, Ms. Torres, do you need to? You got 30 minutes? Ms. Watson-Coleman, do you want to?
Am I one of your Democratic friends?
I
I want to
hope
make
so.
sure as I embark on this.
We'll find out when we'll find out when we get to full committee markup. Yes, thank you. Ms. Watson-Coleman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What can Congress do to promote the use of sound, evidence-based approaches to resolving homelessness and which don't involve further victimizing people who are experiencing it?
Well, thank you for that. Well, I will start by saying homelessness is not a crime. And what HUD can do is to prevent and eliminate homelessness altogether. It's one of the reasons why when we looked at what we prioritized, what the president prioritized in this budget, we tried to make sure that that piece of our work received the amount of funds that we need to meet this moment, notwithstanding the constraints of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. But we also have an obligation to work with our partners on the ground who are on the front lines carrying out this work.
Given the federal government's role in providing public housing maintenance, are there any opportunities for additional funding or incentives to cities that use local funds to preserve and create new public housing?
Right. Thank you for that. And I look forward to my trip to San Antonio with you. You know, one of the things that HUD has used over the past several years to help housing agencies with their capital needs is the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. We call it RAD. And it has been very successful. And agencies have been able to use that and leverage their assets to be able to raise funds to make repairs. And so we see that happening all over the country, including San Antonio. New kitchens, new bathrooms, things that are really meaningful to residents.
Do you have any thoughts and ideas on how you can help them build up the housing stock that communities like mine desperately need?
Right. Right. In the face of HUD not being able to provide any of the community project funding to
No, but specifically to nonprofits.
Certainly, nonprofits are qualified sub-grantees to our all the other funds that we have. Our CDBG funds come to mind. In fact, many nonprofits across the country are deploying our dollars as we speak. There's very limited other opportunities that HUD has to provide nonprofits with direct access to our funds.
I never thought I'd say this, but California's doing something positive and market-driven when it comes to affordable housing. And currently, California is forced to use HUD's outdated methodology, and we're overspending on utilities. This is money that could go towards constructing badly needed housing. This seems like a simple fix, and I want to ask you if HUD has any plans to update its methodology to allow states like California to calculate utility allowances and utilize the tax credit more accurately.
I'm just hearing of this for the first time, Congressman, so I'll commit to figuring out what's going on and look back at my team who's busy taking notes, and we will get back to you on how we can address that.
I appreciate that. It's something that seems pretty reasonable, and I figured you'd be open-minded on this one, wanting to work with us.
Happy to work with you.
California, we really do struggle in some of our housing issues there across the state, even in our rural communities. Since 2014, the federal government has issued nearly $20 billion in awards to communities in homeless assistance, an increase of 53%. Chronic homelessness over the same period increased 56%, and unsheltered homelessness increased 30%, affecting more than 380,000 in both groups last year. In fact, 58% of those counted as homeless in the point-in-time count last year were chronic and unsheltered. How does HUD justify increasing awards year after year when it's clear by your own data that more and more people are experiencing chronic and unsheltered homelessness over the life of the program?
Yeah. I will tell you, you know, we were taken back by what the point-in-time count in January of 2023 showed us in terms of the needs across the country. Since that time, January of 2023, we've deployed a number of funding provided to us by this subcommittee to make sure that we are helping folks on the front lines deal with that 12% increase. We have sent funds to areas to help with encampments. We've sent funds to help with our young homeless individuals. But let me say this: when we took a deep look in the data of that 12% increase, what we found was that many of the individuals were first-time homeless that we believe were being assisted by the very robust social safety net that was created during the pandemic to make sure folks were not deemed homeless. And then when those different programs began to expire is when we saw an uptick. So we know that there's an issue. We've deployed some additional funds, and the 25 budget, as best we can with the constraints around us, has proposed funding to continue to help localities.
Just a quick thought. It may be, and Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, as I said, I talked to a number of mayors yesterday, and I know you, Madam Secretary, you did as well. They talked about that there are several successful examples or projects, models, that are dealing with the issue of homelessness. It may be worthwhile to bring those folks in to listen to this, because it is such a pervasive issue nationwide, and to bring it more to the attention of our colleagues and what are the kinds of things. And then it also, I think, helps us in terms of what are the kinds of projects we should be funding. Beyond significant investments in creating more affordable units, how is HUD thinking in the short term and long term to address low voucher utilization through greater flexibilities for subsidies, expediting lease-up changes to the fair market rate calculations, streamlining recertifications or other means?
No, thank you. And Karen is a tremendous leader and one of the best houses in the country by far. Let me say this, we have learned through two different streams of work, both the flexibilities provided during the pandemic, but also the flexibilities provided to moving to work agencies in terms of ways to streamline their programs so we're focused on outcomes and not just paperwork. And through both of those streams, we know some of the flexibilities that have worked. Some of them we've already put into place, like a more expansive use of our administrative fee to really incentivize landlords. But I know there's more that we can do. And so there's an internal working group at HUD as we speak, talking about what are things that we can do inside of HUD's authorities so that we can carry on some of the flexibilities that you mentioned. But additionally, our legislative proposals also has embedded in them some of the things that we think can work that we don't have the authority to implement, and we need some statutory guidance from Congress.
They're running into this problem where they can't confirm the voucher holder's ability to pay rent because the Public Housing Authority will not confirm how much the housing voucher will cover until there's an agreement in place with the landlord. However, the landlord, this is like a chicken and egg thing. However, the landlord or property manager may not be able to make that agreement until they know the prospective tenant's ability to pay, which is partially based on that voucher. So sometimes these voucher holders are not able to rent these apartments because they may not meet the income requirement without the voucher being counted in. Have you run into this anywhere else?
It looks like we have a sequencing issue a little bit, or maybe a process issue that most other agencies are able to overcome. So I'm intrigued by what you said and would ask the team to follow up with your staff to see exactly what's going on, because this is a process that generally works every day in terms of what the tenant will pay, what the housing authority will pay to get to 100% of the rent.
If the voucher's not counted in their ability to pay, then they may not be able to rent that apartment. So
I understand.
I look forward to working with your staff on that.
Okay.
I really appreciate that that offer.
Within the scope of HUD's jurisdiction, what can we do together to help address the rising costs of homeowners face with respect to insurance, while also obviously being a part of the affordable housing provider mix and the insurance that is available and required of these affordable housing providers?
Yeah. I have yet to run into an apartment owner, public or private, who doesn't bring up the escalating cost of insurance as a problem in terms of being able to maintain their operations or even finding insurance. So I thank you for putting that question out there. We've sat with housing providers about ways in which HUD can use its authorities. We have very limited authorities when it comes to the insurance industry. But what we can do is look at our rules and see ways that we can meet this moment. And I think it was just last week, if not the week before, we adjusted our wind and storm coverage to really help some of those housing providers deal with some of these escalating insurance costs. We're also working inside of the public housing program to see if there's ways that we can address increased costs there. Sometimes agencies don't know that they can come to us and ask for additional funding to address, some of the things that you've described.
Are you aware of the dramatic increase in overdose deaths inside federally supported Housing First programs?
I'm sure that there's an uptick.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to insert into the record an article from the American Medical Association, JAMA, titled Mortality Among People Experiencing Homelessness in San Francisco During COVID-19 Pandemic.
Without objection.
Thank you. Should a person experiencing homelessness who has untreated mental illness with self-medicating substance use disorders receive treatment before we provide them with a housing voucher?
So here's my thoughts on that. In my experience, what I found is that if someone is stabilized in a home, not only is it easier to provide services, but it's actually easier to even find that person. When someone is homeless and on the streets and going through sort of a mental trauma, it is difficult to provide services to them. But what we can do once someone has a home or is in a shelter, we're able to provide those services.
Can you tell me what metrics HUD is using to assess the effectiveness of its programs in addressing homelessness, mental illness, and substance abuse?
Our emergency shelter program and our continuum of care have a number of different metrics that we use. I'm happy to provide those to your office.
What plan do we have in HUD to begin to address this humongous problem?
Thank you for that, Congressman. As a country, we have not kept up with the needs of the public housing portfolio, as you so well stated. And, we can do better, and we need to do better for the families who live in those units. It's one of the reasons why the president, for the past 3 budgets, has proposed billions of dollars of investment for our public housing sites. To deal with heating, to deal with basic, just making sure people have an operating kitchen, to get rid of some of the health hazards we talked about earlier. We have to and we must do more.
Federal home loan banks have said they will be contributing $1 billion to affordable housing this year. They, along with HUD, play a key role in making housing more affordable, as we're discussing. How does HUD try to learn from and partner with federal home loan banks, affordable housing programs, and vice versa? How does that relationship work?
Yeah, so we have a strong working relationship with FHFA, the Federal Housing Finance Agency, who has oversight over the federal home loan banks. And I know that the director there has been very pointed in terms of her expectations on what the FHLBs do. And so that is our point of contact. We also work with our, like I mentioned, our housing providers who do receive sometimes gap financing to build homes from the federal home loan banks. But our primary relationship is through FHFA.
HHS manages a lot of the federal work in this space, but HUD also plays an important role. Just a few weeks ago, HUD announced over $12.7 million through the Foster Youth to Independence Initiative to public housing authorities to provide housing assistance to young adults as they make that transition. Can you please tell us about how the FYI program's targeted assistance has improved outcomes for this vulnerable population? And are there other ways HUD or the administration more broadly is working to invest in youth as they age out of foster care to ensure they are given the resources and tools they need to succeed?
It's wonderful to see you. I think the foster, and thank you for your leadership on this issue, and it's making a tremendous difference. I know that the work that HUD is doing to help foster youth who are aging out of the system is making a tremendous difference. I try to think of when I was 18, 19 years old and being told, go adult, go find yourself an apartment, go figure out how to pay your rent, go all the things. I mean, it's hard enough being in my 50s, much less being somebody who's 18 and being told, go into this brave new world and figure it out. So the least we can do to not just help our foster youth, but also help prevent homelessness is to catch our young adults when they need us the most and house them. And so that program has been working very, very well. And we look forward to seeing it grow. One of the things that we have been doing is making sure that two systems are working with each other, and that is the housing system and the foster care system. And so our leader inside of the public housing program has met with his counterparts at HHS to make sure that we're lockstep in getting these vouchers out the door and helping as many foster youth as we can.
Can HUD share an estimate of its improper payments for last year for these programs? And have we made any progress in estimating improper payments for these programs since January of '24? We're hearing a lot about improper payments. I know Chairman Arrington on the House Budget Committee is trying to tackle improper payments, and there are many areas in the federal bureaucracy where improper payments are, the sum total of them are extremely, extremely high. Help me understand where we are in improper payments.
Thank you, Chairman. So, yes, the Inspector General at HUD and I have been having this conversation over the past several months, ways in which HUD can expedite its review of improper payments. It has been some years that we've done that, and I think that we were presented with a proposal that seemed like it was still too many years to go. One of the reasons is because some of the technological needs that we have to do it in an efficient way. It was a heavy cost burden to the department, sometimes eclipsing even a percentage of the improper payments that we had in our rental assistance programs. But we are going to expedite, and by the commitment that I've made to really the whole HUD family, but also the IG, is that we will have an improper payment estimate by the end of next year. Having said that, the program has improved over the years in terms of making sure that there's no improper payments to begin with. And so while perhaps 20 years ago there was an amount of improper payments that was unacceptable, with the advent of third-party verification that agencies use, some of the compliance work that we do with our privately owned sites, we've been able to have a much more stringent approach to HUD's payments so that we are keeping the public trust. And so we know that that is in place. It is our obligation to get this body an improper payment number, and we're committed to do that.
And with that, the subcommittee stands adjourned.